Hey everyone, in today's quick video, I want to show you how to set up your Sony FX3, or if you're shooting with one in the next day or two and you're not sure exactly how to set it up, this is going to be a quick guide on some of the accessories and some of the settings to just get you started. If you want to see a more in-depth review, Gerald Undone did a great job comparing the Sony A7S III to the FX3, and I want to thank my friend Dave for letting me borrow his FX3. I have an FS7 here, I'm shooting with another FS7, and this is at my A7S II. So I'm in the Sony line and I'm really a big fan. So I wanted to quickly make this video to show you how to set this one up. So the very first thing you need is obviously inserting the battery. Now this is the same one with the Sony A7S III, it's the Sony brand. I typically take 4 of these with a charger on a shoot with me. So I go ahead and insert that in. And then the memory cards, now you have a few choices here. Typically, I use this more expensive one that's made by Sony. This has an 800 write or read speed and 700 write speed. Now, you don't have to have one of these, okay? So you could use standard SD cards too. So it just depends on what kind of shoot you're doing. I have my SD card actually in here, so let me take it out. So SD card, I use 300 megabyte write speed on my SD cards here. And you could even use lower write speeds too, like 170. But I'll put a website that I found that shows you all about read and write speed of memory cards and what each limitations are. So I have my memory card inserted, my battery, and typically I just do a quick lens selection. And a lot of times I start with the G Master 16-35 f2.8. But I do also really like this Sony lens. This is the 24-105, just the G lens, not the G Master, is very useful. And sometimes I use the macro one too. Now the thing to pay attention to is that this is a full frame camera. So if you use different types of lenses like this, it's gonna crop and it's gonna vignette, it's gonna show you the blacks around. So make sure you get a full frame lens that covers this. Sometimes with the Canon lenses that I use, sometimes I use these kind of Metabone adapters. They do cover full frame on some of these, depending on what kind of lens you use. So make sure you do check that out. Then this is one of my favorite things with this camera. If I'm doing audio, I insert this on top. This allows you to have inputs for XLR, just like the bigger Sony cameras do. That's one of my least favorite things about the A7S III. A lot of times, you gotta kind of do a lot of stuff to get the audio sounding right. And with this, you have XLR. So this connects onto the shoe mount. So I remove this little piece and then I insert this right here. Now at this point, this is what I always recommend people take on their kit too, if they have one or if they could get a hold of one. But you definitely need a variable ND filter for these type of cameras. The bigger cameras have built-in ND, so if you're shooting outdoors, it's critical that you have some way to cut the light on your lens. So since this one doesn't have one built in, I always recommend, this one's 82mm based on the size of this lens. This is an 82mm lens in the front. So I always make sure I have this in the bag if I'm shooting anything outdoors. ND is really a must, and one of the things I like over big cameras, over the small ones, is the fact that they have that built-in. With this, I don't like the snap-on ones that go on top of the lens as much, right? You rather have a matte box and a bigger setup, but they do get the job done for the most part. Okay, so that's just the basic setup of getting you started. Now let's go ahead and go through the menu and let me show you just the fundamental things I do to get started. And if I want to get started fast, these are the settings I do with almost every camera 90% of the time. Okay, first, the on and off switch is actually in a little bit of a different spot, right? Typically on like the A7S III, it's over here, but on this, it's in the back right here. So I go ahead and turn this on and flip this open. And once this is set, I want to make sure I format the card, right? So I make sure the card is good to format. And then the first thing I do when I turn it on is I make sure I format the card. And I'll go ahead and shoot some of the B-roll with the A7S III here, but typically the format is here. And this is also touchscreen if you prefer to touch, but the format is in menu 2, and just go ahead and format and choose the slot where you inserted the card, and then go ahead and format that. Then the next thing I do is, it's in the same menu, right? Image quality. I want to go to file format. So let me go to image quality and file format. Now, in almost every situation, if I have the card space, I go with the best, highest quality, which is the one on top. If your shoot doesn't require 4K, this is probably your best bet for HD. And sometimes if I don't have the right memory card, you select this. But if you get an error message based on the speed of your card, selecting this, go ahead and select this one. But typically I select the top one here with the Sony cards that I showed you with the 700 and 800 read and write speed. Then I go to movie settings, and this is where I change my frame rate. So typically I'll go ahead and change it to, if I'm shooting 24 frames, which is almost all the time the case, I'll go ahead and choose that. Then your record setting, this is critical because you really most of the time want 422 10-bit, the top one. But again, this also depends on the type of card, if it's fast enough to handle this at 4K or not. Again, you'll get a message like this if you can't do it with the card that you have, or if there's an issue with the way it's going to play back. So make sure you choose accordingly there. But in almost every situation with every camera, and the A7S III and the FX3, these are my settings: 24 frames, 100 mF, 422 10-bit, and then on the previous menu, if I go back here, I had the top one here. If you were to shoot SNQ, now that's a different kind of thing, and I'll set that up in a different video for you, but this allows you to change that over here to 120 frames, for example. But in this case, I'm not even going in the SNQ menu. I'm just on the file format and the movie format. So we're not done quite yet, but that's really the first two steps, right? All the physical stuff is step one, like lenses, batteries, and card. Then my setting is step two. I decide if I'm shooting 4K, what kind of 4K am I shooting, then what kind of bit rate am I choosing. Those are my steps on the second step of the process, and that's what I showed you what I typically choose for any camera that has those options. Then what I do at this point typically is, let me go to menu to show you, I need to set the color or the color profile, right? So let me just show you the different options you have. That's in that third menu here, and you want to go here to color. So you can choose picture profile, but if you're really new, this is what I recommend. Just go ahead and turn picture profile off. So the very first one is off. Then you get creative control to turn on, and then go ahead and go in there and just choose standard, the very first one. This is just the default color that you'll get with Sony cameras. That's for very, very beginners. That's what I recommend. Picture profile off and creative look to standard. For more advanced users, and what I typically do, is I just choose one of these picture profiles, like let's say picture profile 1. I'll go inside of it here, and gamma I change to either to Cine Tone. Now Cine Tone is kind of new with this camera, and my A7S III doesn't have it yet. So usually I'll choose S-Log3. So you could see all these different options, hyper gamma, but S-Log3 is kind of my go-to for any Sony cameras, so I'll choose that. But this is going to require quite a bit of color correcting. If you don't want to do that, you could just choose a LUT 709 here. Cine Tone is typically going to become the standard, I think, with these type of cameras. So either that or S-Log3. And then I do the same thing with color mode. I change this to match. So if I was choosing Cine Tone, I would do it there too. Or S-Log3, Gamut 3, Cine is what I choose. S-Gamut 3 Cine. So S-Log3 here and S-Gamut 3, or I would do the Cine Tone on both of those. That's all I do here. The rest I leave the same. Now, if you know what you're doing in the color correction stage in the edit, this would be the color profile I choose. And lastly, while I'm on this menu, I'll go ahead and choose my white balance, right? So if I'm shooting under daylight conditions, I'll go ahead and choose that. I almost never do auto because with professional situations, I want more control. So either typically tungsten, or you could dial in your Kelvin color temperature here. But let's say in this case, I'm under daylight lighting, so I'll choose that. And that's pretty much it. At this point, I just choose my ISO. Typically ISO 2000 is what I choose. And all those settings actually could be dialed in on using these dials. So you could change your shutter or ISO. But just to give you a quick brief overview of what you should choose if you're not sure, your shutter speed has to be twice the frame rate. So I chose 24 frames, so I choose 1/50th or 1/40th, whatever is available. These cameras typically have 1/50th. And then I choose my ISO. I typically shoot at 2000 native with a lot of Sony cameras with this kind of chip in it. So ISO 2000, but sometimes you need more or less light, and then you would tweak with ISO there. And then my f-stop, I like to shoot as wide open as possible whenever I can. So this is a f4 lens. So I try to shoot at f4 and then work with my ISO to dial in the different exposures that I need. or I use that snap-on ND filter that I showed you, the variable ND, to cut down light if I'm shooting outdoors, okay? So those are all the steps. The step 1 is all the physical accessories, including lens and card. Step 2 is the recording setting, 4K, HD, bitrate, all of that. Step 3 is color. I need to know exactly what color. Am I shooting S-Log because I'm gonna color correct? Am I shooting standard because I want the card to shoot exactly the way I want right on the camera, so I could just edit faster, not worry about color correction? And then step 4 will be, depending on my environment, setting my white balance and setting my exposure. That's shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO. I dialed those in depending on my shot. So I hope you found this quick video useful. Make sure you follow those steps in any situation that you get into with cameras you're not familiar with, and you usually will have an easy time setting things up for the first time. I hope you found this useful. I'll post these kind of videos every single week on this channel, so make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.